Alright guys, this is KC Turbos doing a quick turbo install on a 6.0 Powerstroke VGT Turbo. I wanted to go over a couple of common questions we get asked. There's a lot of great install videos online already. This one's going to be slightly different. We're going to go over some of the little tips and tricks that we have when installing the turbo. First thing, before you get the turbo installed, a lot of this video is going to focus on the up pipes. A lot of people have a hard time mounting the up pipes of the turbo. I wanted to show some of the tips and tricks that we do to help. First thing is, if you're having problems, you can loosen the bolts on the exhaust manifold down below. You can go ahead and loosen both sides. You can keep the bolts through, but what you want to do is have them loose. The second thing is, you want to make sure that there's lots of play in it, that you can move it around, that you can get it mounted up properly. If this thing's super stiff in there, then the bolts aren't loose enough below. Also, you want to get the oil drain tube installed. When you do install the oil drain tube, make sure it's pushed all the way forward. You don't want a gap in here. If there's a gap right here, the turbo's not going to line up right and you're going to have a hard time getting it to mount. I also want to note that we have removed the oil filter housing, the intake elbow, and the alternator. That's not required for every install. This is just so you can see a little better and get in there. Some alternators will have to be removed. The OEM are a little smaller. You can usually wrap the turbo around it, but some of the bigger alternators like DC Power, you won't be able to squeeze the turbo through. I always recommend replacing the up pipe clamp. This thing can be a pain in the butt. They're not very expensive. You can buy them from Ford, or we have them on the website. We'll have the part number in the description below. What I do is I loosen the bolt all the way until you just barely have it threaded on. It makes it a little easier. And then I will open it up and stick it over the up pipes, just like that. Now, some Ford guys are going to tell you that's on backwards, but I'll show you later why I do that. And when you do get it installed, I want to show that you need to pull it on, push that over, and then you'll squeeze it closed as you're installing the turbo. You won't be able to see that very well later on, but just keep in mind that that part is unhooked, and then you're going to hook it back on later on when I get the turbo on. So you want it sitting back behind the lip, up out of the way, so the turbo can make correctly. So let's go ahead and drop the turbo in. You want to get the turbo in and set it on the O-ring. Lubing the O-ring and the inside of the turbo makes it drop in so much easier. When you do drop it in, you want to make sure that the pins are lined up on the front and the back. You see that here? You see that pin? There's one in the front, and then there is one in the back. See the pin? It's got to be lined up and on the pedestal. If it's down below it or to the side, it won't ever go in right. So what I usually do is I'll get the turbo to pedestal bolts in, get them cinched up. You don't want them super tight yet, you just want them cinched up. So there's the front one, there's the back one. Another thing I want to point out is this is an 04 plus pedestal, and we're installing an 03 style turbo. It's very common for people to do 03 turbo swaps for the whistle. A lot of modified turbos are based off of the 03 turbine housing too. We get a lot of questions, well, what about the third bolt? Well, you can just leave it out. If you get around and see back up in there, it's hard for me to see on the camera, but there's a third mounting bolt on the back of the turbo. You can just leave it off. It's over engineering on Ford to have so many bolts anyways. Most of the other years, 7.3, 6.4, they've only got 2 bolts. It's plenty strong between the mounting bolts in front and the up pipes to get everything to line up and hold there in place. So when mounting the up pipes, if there's even a little tiny gap in between the turbo and the up pipes, it won't seal right. That is the most common problem we have. Someone installs a turbo, low boost, high EGTs, maybe they smell exhaust in the cab, and the most common thing people say is, well, wouldn't I know if I have an exhaust leak? That's funny, because what they're describing is exactly an exhaust leak. And what they think they need to do is get in there and crank down on this clamp, and that usually just ruins the clamp and breaks it. You have to have these things lined up perfect before cinching the clamp down. The clamp will not pull it into place. It holds it in place. What you need to do is get those two lined up perfectly and then tighten the clamp. I'll kind of show what it looks like. Everything's nice and new on this, so it's easy to see, but with the up pipes loose, you can really move them around. And what you're going to want to do is get it lined up just perfect. You can even see with these brand new up pipes that there's a gap. It's not lining up perfect. It's actually just a little bit off. So what we'll do is we'll put the clamp on there, cinch it up a little bit, and then maybe jiggle the up pipes, maybe move the turbo around just a little bit. I don't know if you can see that there's a little bit of movement left in the turbo, and there's still some movement left in the up pipes. That way you can get everything lined up right and seated. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. You gotta really love your turbo during this process, because you get in there, you wrap your arms around it like this, and it's much easier to get out of everything. So what you wanna do is pull the up pipes close, put the V-band clamp on all the way around. And then remember that part where you got to hook that clamp on the back, because we disconnected it to get it on easier. Of course, we're making it problematic on purpose, because we know that's what you guys will run into, right? All right, guys, this is an awesome video because we ran into some problems. Probably typical of what you guys run into. These up pipes will not mount to the turbo. They are just not even close. I can't, I tried fighting it, I tried working on it. So there's another trick you can do. There's a much better option to get up pipes that fit, but if they don't fit, what you can do is completely loosen the turbo from the pedestal, because now you can lift and move the turbo to get it lined up. Then you can cinch the clamp down and then pull back down on the turbo to get it seated on the pedestal. So I'll show you what that looks like. So you're going to reach around the back of the turbo and move it to where it lines up. Now that it's totally loose, it should be much easier to get those clamps to line up. Remember that trick earlier I said about facing the clamp this way? So the reason I had you face the clamp forward is so you can grab the gun and come right in from the front. It's 11 millimeter. You got perfect access to it. What I usually do is I'll start tightening it down nice and slow until you start to feel a little bit of tension. And then what I'll do is I'll get it off, move the turbo around a little bit. You see it just loosened up. The clamp didn't loosen, but you got everything closer. So you can squeeze the clamp together just a little bit more. Put the gun on it. Get a few more turns out of it. You can see the turbo's starting to move and the up pipes are starting to move because it's starting to seat. And then I'll move it around a little bit more, get it in the right spot. And you see the clamp loosened up just a little bit more again. Start cinching it down. Turbo's moving, up pipes are moving. There's still about 1.5 inch gap in there. I want to show this gap. Right there. You see this gap? You know the up pipes are seated good because it'll be nice and tight. You'll barely even be able to get a finger in there. So that's the goal. If there's a gap here, the up pipes aren't tight enough to the turbo. The clamp hasn't been seated right. You got to close that gap. So let's keep going. When you're tightening it up, because you don't have the bolts into the turbo pedestal, you want to make sure the turbo isn't crooked one way or the other. You still want it generally mounted in there correctly, but you just want the room to be able to move it around and make sure you get that up pipe seated right. My gap's getting pretty close. So before I cinch it down all the way, once you know it's close, then I'll get the bolts put into the turbo pedestal. Sometimes it takes a little work though now, because you have those up pipes mounted first, but usually you can move the turbo around, pull it down a little bit, get it over to where the bolts get started. It's important to get a few threads in there. You don't have to tighten it all the way, but at least get it started, because if you get that up pipe clamp too tight, you might not ever get the turbo bolts started. You don't want to cross thread it. So I've gotten my turbo bolts started. The up pipes lined up correctly. So now you can take it, tighten it the rest of the way. get a good look at that clamp now that it's on there all the way. See that? The gap, I can barely get my finger in between it. Not sure if you can see that on the video. That's what you want it to look like. Everything mounted upright. When these things are nice and tight, you won't have an issue with it leaking anymore. Just another shot of the clamp, what it looks like. So, then you can tighten your pedestal bolts the rest of the way. See the turbo's kind of twisting a little as it continues to mount up properly. Anything on the back. Anyways, that's some tips and tricks on how to get the up pipes installed. Newer up pipes are usually a lot easier. Getting up pipes that fit are always a plus. There are a few tips and tricks that maybe you'll see online where you put a ratchet strap around the pipe and you pull forward to the front of the truck. We really don't like to do that, but in dire need, I have done that once or twice. But usually loosening the up pipes at the exhaust manifold and loosening the turbo, moving it around and getting the up pipes seated properly first. That's the first connection you want to work on, and then work your way around and tighten everything back down. That'll usually eliminate these exhaust leaks. The other thing that I'll usually do is when I first start up the truck, I'll run up here and wrap my hand around this clamp. Usually if it's leaking, you'll feel it kind of poofing on your hand. And you don't want to do it while it's hot and you don't let the truck run for too long, but when it's cold, you can run over here real quick, check with your hand before it gets hot, let go before the up pipes heat up. I'll also do that with the exhaust manifolds down below where the up pipes meet up with the exhaust manifold, kind of feel for any exhaust leaks. That's what drives your turbo, is the exhaust. People think, well, I just have a little bit of an exhaust leak. No, the exhaust leaks are robbing power, robbing fuel mileage. They're causing your vanes to be more aggressive on the turbo, which can actually lessen the life of your turbo. So first things first, get those up pipes lined up right, make sure they're nice and tight, and then you can work on installing the rest of the turbo. Thanks for watching, guys. Just post up in the comments if you have any more questions.